Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from the August 26, 2022 Board of Health meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Jenny Fishman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The meeting minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is to review and act on issuing a tobacco retailer license to Market Basket, Edgemere Crossing at Flint Pond Road, 200 Hartford Turnpike, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545. And I guess
Zach.
I think the reason for putting this on the agenda is, I think it was late last year, Carrie, the board voted to reduce the number of available tobacco retailer licenses. At the time, though, we were unaware of the Market Basket Edgemere Crossing, interested in obtaining a license. So putting it on the agenda to see if the board is willing to allow this to take place. Do you have any discussion from any of the attendees?
I can start.
So this would increase it by 2 licenses?
So yeah, I can begin. The reason a cap was put was part of a density strategy that we were aiming, since at the time Shrewsbury was at 19 retailers for a long time. And going back to 20, the idea behind that was that we reduce the number of retailers because the ultimate focus is with interest in public health, less access to youth. So I think the board should consider that reason. And then I would also say that it might be like, if there are other retailers learn about this, that they also need permits, are they like everybody is going to come each time and ask for a permit? Is the process like going to be the same? So these are some things like we should consider in mind. And I don't know, Cheryl, do you have something else to add?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My understanding is that Shrewsbury's regulation now has a cap of 10 permits.
20.
Is that correct?
20.
20, I apologize, 20.
Yeah.
And what you are, because I remember I was asked this maybe a month ago, what you're doing now, I believe, is attempting or considering amending your regulation to increase the cap. And legally, you have the right to do this without a public hearing. But my concern is if you do it without a public hearing, I'm not sure, has notice been given to the other retailers about this potential amendment to the regulation?
No.
Because the only reason I'm bringing this up is, as Jerry said, just be prepared. It's sort of like when you grant a variance, which is not what you're doing, you're considering amending the regulation. But when you do something like this, there may be an issue with other folks wanting to come in and ask you to amend the regulation again to increase the number of retailers in Shrewsbury. So it's just a concern. It certainly is nothing that I would advise, because your town attorney would be the one that would give you advice on this issue. But amending a regulation is a challenge when you're doing it without a public hearing. So it's perfectly legal. It's just not something that the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards ever encourages, just because of potential repercussions. And there was a rationale for putting the cap in place originally. I don't know if any of the board members were there at the time that the cap was put in place. Normally, a cap is put in place, and it's usually 1 or 2 permits over what you originally had. So I don't know how many Shrewsbury had when the cap was originally put in place. But just those two things. Again, it's your decision. It's your decision. It might be nice if your town attorney could weigh in on it, but again, you have the legal authority to make this decision.
I'm just gonna add one thing, only because I'm the gatekeeper of all the permits for the Board of Health. We do not have anyone on a quote-unquote waiting list for a tobacco permit at this time. That's it. I just wanna say that, nobody's waiting.
Okay, and plus, I would add that we did reduce the number of available licenses just at a regular Board of Health meeting. There was no public hearing on the reduction of the number of licenses. And it's a difficult thing for me. I think at the time, we made kind of an arbitrary decision to reduce it to 20, not realizing that this was going to happen. So I'm kind of torn on this. The other board members have any input?
No, and I recognize the public health issues Jerry has pointed out, which is we really want to limit access to minors and underage members of the public to tobacco access. And on the other hand, we're weighing a business interest, which is essentially the ability to be able to stay viable as a business by virtue of being able to sell. So I'm intrigued by the concept of the fact that we sort of arbitrarily decreased our cap, and so the question begs is, should there be some rationale as to how we increase our cap, if we even choose to increase, and if so, on what basis? Because as pointed out, this may not be the last request, we are going to get additional requests as well. So one of two options is, one, I think we should, I would suggest we defer the decision right now, because this is not a time expedient decision that needs to be made so as to be able to study with our legal counsel, et cetera, and sort of explore a little bit of why we, or on what basis we chose to decrease the cap. And if we were to explore the option of increasing the cap, on what basis would be increased, by how much and what, so that we have some rationale in place for the future as well, for future decision making. And number two, if the decision is to go around increasing the cap, would it beg the interest of having a public hearing so as to gauge public interest in the same thing before we, as a board, make a decision, just because this affects the public in general, and I don't want to be the only person be in the position of making a decision on behalf and assuming that that's the best decision for the public without some public input.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abraham. Jenny Fishman?
I think I would agree with deferring and consulting with the attorney. I'm just thinking of other developments that are happening within the community that there will be retail in, and keeping that in mind going forward. So I think it is wise to take a moment and think about the rationale for increasing and what we would actually want to increase it to.
Okay, so I guess the thought is to defer the decision on this item, and when we get to it, the next item, in terms of consulting with the town council. And what is the thought on possibly having a public hearing also to go along with this?
I would be open to it.
As would I.
Okay, so in that case then, if we defer the decision, then do we need to make a motion on the item? Or just defer it?
I think it would be just defer it at this time, and then,
We can make a motion to defer as well, just so
Yeah,
that, I mean, it just keeps it
Okay.
clean. So I'll make a motion to defer decision on this particular agenda item.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Jenny Fishman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay, so the next item is related. It's review and act issuing a tobacco retail license in Shrewsbury to MB Spirits Edgemere Crossing at Flint Pond Road, 200 Hartford Turnpike, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545, in its own separate space directly adjacent to the market basket, but there is no interior access from one space to the other. Obviously, we've just decided to defer acting on these items right now, so do I have a motion to defer action on item number 4?
Motion to defer.
Jenny Fishman?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Jenny Fishman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The next item is to review and act on increasing the number of tobacco retailer licenses from 20 to a number voted on by the Shrewsbury Board of Health, and revising the existing Shrewsbury tobacco regulations with an immediate effective date based upon the vote. Again, this is related to the items 3 and 4. Do I have a motion to defer action on item number 5?
Motion to defer.
Jenny Fishman?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Jenny Fishman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay, and in relation to that, we would also propose to hold a public hearing when we do meet on this the next time. Okay, the next item on the agenda is review and discuss coronavirus COVID-19 update. I don't know if
Defer to Zach.
Zach, if you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think things are holding fairly steady right now with COVID in the region, and certainly in Shrewsbury. There is I think the two kind of updates to talk about are the bivalent vaccination, which is we've seen a good number of people who are taking part in that. The new booster that's available. People are encouraged to get it with their flu shot as well. And there was, I know, at least one clinic held in Shrewsbury, possibly 2, coinciding with events that were happening here that were the bivalent vaccine is made available. And then we are seeing kind of a slight uptick across the region right now in terms of, we're in an interesting place where the metrics that we used to use or have used historically for COVID aren't as useful anymore with everyone testing at home and the availability of home testing that doesn't end up getting reported. So things like our 2-week positivity and other measures are not super, we just can't use them in the same way. But we have seen a slight uptick in the wastewater measures that we use to see how much COVID shedding in our wastewater there is, and then also in hospitalizations, which is both COVID related and non-COVID related, but enough to be, I think, to re-stress the importance of taking precautions, making sure that you get the vaccine if you haven't, getting the booster if you are eligible for it. And if you're going to be in close proximity with a lot of people wearing a mask. So beyond that, we're holding steady and doing, still doing the things we've been doing for a long time now.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Dr. Abraham, do you have any comments?
No, I echo Zach's sentiments. Our numbers are definitely higher. We are actually depressingly higher than we expected, especially hospitalizations at this time, which was a bit of an unexpected increase. And I think it may be a temporary blip, but it definitely is something to be worried about if the trend continues as colder weather prevails. I think the challenge has been, as Zach outlined, is the adoption of the booster. So there's only one approved booster now, which is the bivalent, the new booster. The others, the emergency use authorization has been withdrawn, so they're not available as boosters anymore. But nationally it's about 2%, which is dismal rates of adoption. And even locally, it's a bit of a task to convince patients to take it. Everybody's sick of taking vaccines, and we hear all sorts of excuses. We recognize that. But we see no other way out of this other than to do that. And so we're trying to push it. We're trying to coincide it with flu vaccines so as that people are getting one, people can get both together at the same time, and so on. It's definitely more of an uphill challenge, maybe a little more than previous occasions, just because I think everyone is sort of in the mode of okay, COVID is here to stay, we'll live with it just like we've lived with flu for years. And so this is nothing different, so why change life as we live every day? And so I get that mindset, but at the same time, I think we're worried because the more elderly, frail, immune compromised folks who are among us, who we may not completely recognize, are definitely more vulnerable, and we're seeing that in the rate of hospitalizations that we're seeing, that those are the more fragile people who tend to get more disease. So that's a challenge. Zach didn't touch on it, but just monkeypox. So I'm fortunate to be on calls with Zach and others who are monitoring our cities down well. We've had about 14 cases, correct, 14 still holding as best we know. So that sort of plateaued a bit, which is optimism on our front. I think that is holding that way. Vaccine is available. It's more accessible. People are choosing to get it who might consider themselves at higher risk. And so that sort of nationwide on a bit of a hold, which is good. And everyone may have heard that or must have seen in the news that there's now a little Ebola outbreak in Uganda. And so the CDC has recommended screening all people coming in from Uganda in all major airports, they be screened. And this is deja vu because you may remember 2 or 3 years ago when we had the Ebola outbreak, we had people being diverted from certain countries only to certain airports so that they could be screened before they could even enter the country because of the risk of acquisition of Ebola into the country. And so I think more to follow. I think this is representative again of underrepresented parts of the world who don't have enough access to vaccines and a robust healthcare. And so you see public health epidemics occurring on a periodic basis, and this is no different. We've seen this happening across the years, and I think we will continue to see it. So I might say selfishly from an infectious disease physician standpoint, this is a guarantee of a preservation of our business, but sadly this is something that we will encounter on an ongoing basis. I think public health preparedness and people like Zach in their roles do yeoman's work, which is often under-recognized and underappreciated, but definitely helps keep us all safe. So.
Okay, thank you. Has there been any detection of other variants of COVID-19?
None that I'm aware of. Zach, no.
Nothing significant there. Some shifts as we throughout the pandemic, as we've seen, but nothing concerning or out of the ordinary.
So the current bivalent booster then should be effective against the prevalent COVID cases?
Absolutely, yes. That is the feeling. I think we're just seeing more of the variant is milder in its clinical manifestation, so you get milder disease for the large part, except people who might have underlying illnesses which might make them more susceptible to severe disease. But a big factor is children are back in school, they're unmasked, they're together, so that's a big vector. So a lot of the population that we see are parents of school-going children. And so the challenge is more than the burden of illness is the fact that people are out of work, so that leads to exacerbation of already existing healthcare shortages, and that personnel shortage is bound to escalate because people are out for a window of time. So that leads to added pressures on the healthcare system, which is an added concern.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item
I
on
did hear that there were, I think across Europe, there's some offshoots, variants of Omicron, but none of them seem to be dominant. Have you heard that too, Ma'am?
I'm sure, the sequencing of virus occurs on a much more rapid and robust scale in Europe. So you're right that there will always be little variants being detected, but none to any significant level that it has
Right.
raised concern. So you're correct. I think we will go on seeing small variants occurring, but none right now that have risen to any level of significance.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Sure.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is review and discuss the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance updates. And
I don't
Micah.
have any specific updates.
Okay.
You have the data there, but if you had any questions for me, I would definitely be able to answer them for you.
Okay, any questions from the board?
No?
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, then the next item on the agenda is to review our meeting schedule. So looking at November, I imagine November 11th is a holiday for Town Hall, correct? Carrie?
Yes.
Okay,
Is the 4th an option?
I could do the 4th. Jenny, would November 4th work for you?
I think, yes, it works.
Okay. And then can't we schedule a public hearing at the same time?
Yes, I should have.
Is that enough time to do what you need to
Yes.
do, Carrie?
Yeah, Sherry, and Cheryl, if I craft like a blurb for, yeah, and Cheryl. Cheryl and Terry, if I craft, a blurb for a public hearing notification, would you please just to review it, just to make sure that I've captured everything correctly? Okay, yeah. And we'll get a letter crafted to the tobacco retailers, of course, too. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Jenny?
Second?
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Jenny Fishman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.